these are real kind of stories. People think this is like, fiction, but actually it's real life. And unless you are exposed to this kind of stuff, it's hard to believe.
I want to remove that kind of idea that everything can just be explained like with an hallucination. So, what is the difference between hallucinations and supernatural encounters? How would you differentiate between the two?
It's excellent question, mashallah. You've done your research well. So he did have like again a psychotic illness, but he said to me, he said, Dr. Abu Isa, I know that jinns were affecting me. I said, how? He said, even now whilst I'm sitting here, there's a jinn, my qareen. My qareen is speaking to your qareen right now. And I can tell what you're thinking because the the qareen is telling me. I said,
Wow.
so he told me, he said, I
This
said,
is
like,
becoming,
what? Yeah, go on.
yeah, I'm saying this is becoming more interesting than I expected. Yeah, go ahead.
SubhanAllah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Incisive Thoughts. And today we have a groundbreaking topic, a fascinating topic for all of you. We are going to deal with some questions that almost every Muslim goes through. So today's topic is going to be jinn and mental health. And the speaker that we have, it's an honor to introduce Dr. Abu Isa. He's a highly respected psychiatrist and expert in mental health, addiction, and adolescent psychiatry. He holds a degree from Oxford University and specialized in child and adolescent psychiatry in Manchester. Dr. Abu Isa is known for his unique approach to mental health, integrating Western psychiatric methods with Islamic teachings. He has extensive experience in psychotherapy, trauma-informed care. Importantly, he is well known for his expertise in dealing with cases with jinn possession, black magic, which is called sihr, and spiritual afflictions. Working closely with scholars such as Ustad Tim Humble, his work combines Ruqyah, which is spiritual healing, with psychiatric treatments, offering a holistic approach to complex cases. His deep understanding of both spiritual and psychological dimension of human experience makes him the crucial voice in today's discussion. So without further wasting more time, let's call him on stage.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you doing?
Bismillah. Alhamdulillah, I'm very good. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair for the introduction. I'll just start. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, rabbi shrah li sadri, wa yassir li amri, wa ahlul uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. It's an honor, Akhi Khalid, to be invited to your show. Jazakumullah khairan. I got a nice surprise a couple of weeks ago. You emailed me to see if I was available. As you know, we're all busy these days, Ramadan approaching. So, alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitated this discussion, and inshallah, it will be beneficial. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put barakah in it and accept it from us, inshallah.
Inshallah. It's an honor to have you on this platform. So, just giving a brief of the topic to our audience. Today, we will be discussing the interaction of jinn afflictions, black magic, and mental health, exploring how these issues are understood with both Islamic tradition and modern psychiatry. Some key questions which we will address is, can psychiatry and psychology fully explain jinn-related experiences? Like, can they explain them out and just call them hallucinations or something like that? Or they are actually real? Or do they fall short in addressing this phenomena? Second question would be, how do we differentiate between psychiatric disorders and general spiritual afflictions? And third is, what is the role of Ruqyah in addressing mental health conditions that involve paranormal elements? Another question, how do jinn-related issues, black magic, and mental health challenges manifest within the Muslim community, and what are the best ways to address them? So these are some crucial topics that most of the time they are overlooked. And what I want to start off with is a very basic but very important question, which is, are jinn afflictions real?
MashaAllah, a very good question. And I think this is a very fascinating topic. I've done quite a few podcasts with, Sheikh Gabriel, and even Hamza and Dr. Khalil about this. And I think the Muslim community like this topic. So it's nice to talk about it. It's a broad, vast topic, actually. So I think we'll try and hopefully, inshallah, give some insights. The first thing to say is, as Muslims, we obviously believe in the unseen, right? Alladhina yu'minuna bil ghayb. We believe in the unseen. And unfortunately, we live in a time where people are worshipping science, I would say. So unless they can see it, feel it, they don't believe in it. And I'm talking about even Muslims. So I've come across even Muslim mental health professionals, psychiatrists, psychologists who don't believe in the unseen. So that's the first thing to say, that as Muslims, our aqidah is that we believe in angels, we believe in the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we cannot see. We know that jinn exist, okay? There's so much evidence from the Quran, from the authentic hadith, Surah Jinn, for example. And there's many dalil for their existence. So yes, jinn do exist. Now, how does that interact with kind of the Western paradigm of understanding psychiatry? That's a fascinating question. So even within brother Khalid, within psychiatry, we have diagnostic classifications. We have something called the DSM, Diagnostic Statistical Manual, and we have ICD, International Classification of Diseases. So basically, these are classification systems, and they get updated every couple of years. So right now, we're on the version 11 of the ICD and version 5 of the DSM. And they basically are a group of psychiatrists and other mental health professionals that look at symptoms and they categorize disorders. So within, you'd be interested to know that within these diagnostic classifications, we do have something called dissociative identity disorder or conversion disorder, trance and possession disorders. So even scientists or psychiatrists who don't believe, they recognize that within different cultures, even within Christianity, you have the concept of exorcism. Obviously in Islam, we have Ruqyah. In some cultures in Latin America, they also believe in possession. So this is something that they've tried to kind of like categorize in the kind of the classification. And there's something called medically unexplained symptoms or conversion disorder. So what that is basically is something we can't explain. So to give you an example, maybe somebody loses their eyesight. They have an MRI scan, they have a neurological examination. There's nothing reversible that they can identify. So then they say, oh, this is probably some trauma that the patient experienced, and as a result, the body shut down. So they've gone blind. So they can't explain it. Okay. So this is why it's very limited, the understanding within kind of psychiatry or mental health. And that's why as Muslims, alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with some knowledge of the unseen, right? So from my experience, I can talk about how, you can distinguish between mental health or mental disorder and the unseen, things like sihr or jinn possession. So that's, I think, a good introduction. And then we can talk about that in more detail, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Yeah.
So you touched on a very important key subject, which is many of these aspects are beyond the realm of or at least unexplained with the current kind of paradigm we have. And the previous discussion that we had related to this topic was Brother Gabriel Romani, and we dealt with how psychology has become very materialistic in nature. So anyone who's interested in that subject, they can watch that discussion.
Yes.
But the key conclusion was that because psychology is now kind of stuck with materialistic, psychology and psychiatry is stuck with materialistic assumptions, there is some brick wall that it has hit, and it cannot go beyond that.
Yes. So so let's talk about it. So from my experience, Khalid, I would categorize, if somebody says to me, okay, I'm not sure if this person has a mental illness or is there another issue related to jinn or sihr. Basically, I categorize into 3 groups, okay? So you have one group of patients or people who only have a mental illness. There's no evidence that they have any issue with jinn or sihr, okay? And we'll talk about that group. Then you have a group that's purely metaphysical or related to the unseen, okay? They don't have a mental illness. It can only be explained from our Islamic paradigm related to maybe jinn possession or sihr or black magic. And then you have a third category where basically they have both, right? So if you have a mental illness, something like depression, anxiety, psychosis, you are at an increased risk of being attacked by jinn and other unseen forces. And vice versa. If you're suffering from, say, jinn possession, you're also more likely to develop mental disorders like anxiety, depression, suicidality. So broadly speaking, I would say that there's three categories of people, and somebody will fall in one of these three categories. And this is from my experience working with mashayikh like Tim Humble in the UK. I was working with some Libyan sheikh as well. And basically, my vision is a holistic assessment. So we work together. Alhamdulillah, I have some knowledge as well. We work together with mashayikh to exclude, a mental disorder. And this is the way that basically Tim Humble, if he gets if somebody calls him and says, "Look, I think there's an issue with jinn," he usually refers to me and says, "Look, go see Dr. Abu Isa or speak to him. And if he can exclude a mental disorder, then we can talk." So I think this is very important as a message to the Muslim community, that because there's stigma around mental illness and addiction, for example, people don't want to think that it's only a mental illness. There must be an explanation from the unseen. This is also something that I think you've probably come across living in the subcontinent, that people over attribute problems to jinn or black magic. This guy's done black magic on me. So that's also something that I think there's over attribution. So generally speaking, from the cases that I've seen, there's not the vast majority don't have an issue with jinn or black magic. A vast majority will be probably some kind of psychological disease or things like that.
Okay, alhamdulillah. So
Yeah.
I completely agree with you when you mentioned that, some people take it far beyond, and, everything is related to some, for example, sihr or some kind of jinn infliction. And, we should always make sure and diagnose properly what the issue is.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
That takes us to a very important subject, which is where, even diving deep into the subject, there's one thing which we can cover first, which is generally this topic. First of all, is something that many professionals, they shy away from. So firstly, I want to commend you for your work, and I've been following your work for many years, and how you tackle this kind of interdisciplinary approach, which is very much needed at this point of time. And many professionals actually shy away from talking about this subject, and this is where I think there's a gap within our ummah which we need to fill in.
Yes.
And because we haven't filled that gap, that gives room for many skeptics to just explain away all of these aspects which are real to just hallucination. So I want to first dive into this. I want to remove that kind of idea that everything can just be explained like with an hallucination. So what is the difference between hallucinations and supernatural encounters? How would you differentiate between the two?
It's excellent question, mashallah. You've done your research well. It's a difficult thing to describe, because it's not discrete, like it's not black and white, right? If this is something you're experiencing, it's like a hallucination, and otherwise it's quite blurred. So basically, for very simple language, I recognize that most of your audience will not be medically trained. So basically, what a hallucination is can be different modalities. It can be visual, so you can see something. It could be auditory, you can hear something like somebody talking to you. It can be tactile, which means you can feel something like crawling on your skin. Okay. So it's basically where you perceive something as being real in the absence of an external stimulus. For example, now, maybe like behind me, you might see, if you're having hallucination, behind me, you might see like a black shadow, like in the form of a body, right? But it's not there, but you will perceive it like that. So that is what is a hallucination. Or right now, whilst I'm talking to you, maybe in your ear, you can hear another voice talking to you saying, "This guy's talking rubbish, and don't listen to him, and he's gonna cause you harm," and kind of like paranoid thoughts. So that's what's a hallucination. Now, people who are affected by jinn, they can experience visual hallucinations. So I've seen people describe like a shadow, seeing a shadow, a black shadow, which is terrifying. But generally speaking, they don't experience hallucinations. It's more change in personality. And it's more like people who are living with that person affected by the jinn, noticing, okay, this guy, he's acting strange, maybe he's aggressive, maybe he's like, become isolated. So it's more that, although again, like I said, I have seen people, brothers and sisters, who've experienced some hallucinations, but generally speaking, a hallucination means that there's most likely like a mental disorder underlying that issue. There's some more complexity, which I think we'll talk about. The other thing to mention, I'll give you an example. Maybe if I describe an example for you, it kind of becomes alive. So you may have heard this. I've discussed this in other podcasts. So I have a friend. So I was living in Qatar. Right now I'm in Dubai. I lived in Qatar for 8 years. From the UK, as you can tell from my accent. So I had a friend, and he was living in Qatar at the time, and he has a sheikh, also my sheikh, Sheikh Hazim Rajab. He's an American Egyptian sheikh. So he asked my friend, like, can you go and speak to this couple, American revert couple, who basically the husband rang Sheikh Hazim and said, my wife's acting strangely, bizarre behavior, her personality's changed, she's aggressive. So he asked my friend, his name is Imran Abu Musa, he said, can you go and basically read some Quran? And my friend, he was very reluctant, but he went anyway. So when he went to this house, a couple, American revert couple, they don't speak any Arabic, okay? So he asked him, like, okay, what's the issue? So he mentioned that, look, my wife, in the last few months, she's been acting bizarrely and aggressive, and we've taken her to a doctor, and there's been nothing. They said there's no issue, it's more psychological. So he said, okay, khalas, I'm going to start reading Quran. I'm going to start doing reading Surah Al-Baqarah. And if she starts acting strangely, you need to restrain her, because obviously I'm non-mahram, I cannot touch your wife. So he said, no problem. So he said he started reading the Quran, and maybe after like 5-10 minutes, the sister, she started acting strangely. So she adopted like a abnormal posture, sitting like on her knees, and started like hissing and making like strange noises. Subhanallah. So my friend Imran, he was a bit like, what's this? What's going on here? Anyway, he continued reciting, and subhanallah, after another couple of minutes, he heard a male voice speaking Arabic. And subhanallah, and these two, brother and sister, husband and wife, they don't speak any Arabic, okay? So when he looked up, it was a male voice, right? So the sister was speaking in a male voice in Arabic. Subhanallah. So he became, obviously that was quite a shock to him, and mashallah, he knows Arabic, so he started like speaking to this jinn. It's basically a jinn. So this male voice said, look, I'm a jinn, I've been sent by a magician to cause problems in this family. And subhanallah, so, and in the midst of that, she was trying to attack him, okay? So he found, like, I think in Urdu we say jharu, like a stick, and he started like hitting her because she was trying to attack him, and the husband was trying to restrain her. Subhanallah. And in his mind, he's like, I was cursing Sheikh Hazim for putting me in this situation, because it's something that he's not experienced before. And then after a couple of more minutes, he heard another male voice speaking Arabic. And he looked up, and subhanAllah, the husband was also possessed.
Oh.
And that was a complete shock. And now, mashallah, the husband was a big African-American brother, muscular. So both of them are now trying to attack him, and he's got the Mus'haf in one hand, and he's like pushing them away, and and then at the same time conversing with these two jinn. And then he said at one point they almost overpowered him, and mashallah, he does Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So he said, I started punching the brother in the ribs to like stop him like overpowering me. And at one point he said, I kicked him. I'm like, Ijlis, and I kicked him, and he went flying across the room. And then he settled. So he said that he started conversing with these two jinn, and they were refusing to leave the bodies. So he convinced them, because when you recite the Quran, they burn the jinn, right? So they agreed to leave initially from the eyes, which he said, no, don't leave from the eyes because it can damage the eyes. You need to leave from the feet. So with a lot of convincing, they eventually agreed to leave. But then they said, look, we're going to come after you. So they threatened, subhanAllah, Imran as well. This lasted maybe, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes. After that, subhanAllah, Khalid, the husband and wife, they had no recollection of what had happened. They just said, brother, what happened? We don't know what happened. And the husband's like, look, I've got some pain in my ribs. He said, I'm really sorry I had to throw you a few punches because you were trying to attack me. So subhanAllah, they had no idea, no recollection of what had just happened. So this kind of description, there's no mental disorder that can explain this, right? So I've been working in psychiatry for many years, and even if you look at the literature, there is no way that somebody will start speaking a new language, okay, and not have any memory of like the experience. So this is, and obviously the reaction was in reaction to the Quran as well. So these are kind of flags that suggest that this is an issue, metaphysical issue related to jinn possession. For example, this is one case.
Wow. That was quite interesting. And your stories are very famous. Like, they're like sometimes, listening to them and, like, you get this sense of Subhanallah moment, like
Subhanallah.
what that
Yeah.
moment might have been, for that person.
Yeah. I'll tell you something funny. Like whenever I try and talk about jinn, there's always some sort of issue, technical issue. So I don't know if you saw some of the podcasts, like with Khalil, he had some
Yeah.
like static,
Mm.
even
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Gabriel.
yeah. I've
So
seen that.
Subhanallah, may Allah protect
And
us. So I think, yeah,
I
they
mean,
obviously they're not going to be happy with us talking about how to protect ourselves. So I mean
definitely.
that yeah, go on. Sorry, go on.
No, I was saying that many people who, when they talk about the jinn, I've also seen, Allah knows best what that is, but I have seen many people, they like, when they talk about jinn on YouTube, I come across many people and they say that they experience something like this.
Yeah, subhanallah. I
So
mean, yeah, subhanallah. I'll give you another example. So Tim, I think you might have heard this as well, but for those people who haven't, Tim, Ustad Tim Humble, he was living in Saudi Arabia. He obviously studied in Medina University. So he told me that there's actually a sheikh who's dedicated to finding magicians, and he has a military escort and a police escort, like a team. So Ustad Muhammad Tim, he said that like he was working with this sheikh for some time. And this is an eyewitness account. So obviously, like we have to be cautious because especially in our culture, there's a lot of stories which are false,
yeah,
folk stories, I would say. So I obviously I trust Ustad Tim Humble, like he's a brother, and I'm sure he has a lot of credibility. So he's not going to start making up, inshallah, any random story. But so this is his eyewitness account. So he mentioned that one of these days, they were informed that there was a magician somewhere. And he was causing a lot of problems in the community. So he went with the sheikh and their escort, police escort, towards this guy's house. And it was early in the morning, I think after Fajr. Subhanallah. So as they approached his house, Tim said that they saw this guy kind of leave his house, and he kind of leaned forward and he started flying through the air, like his feet lifted
wow,
off the ground, subhanallah. And he was like, not like very high, but like you could see there's a gap between his feet and the earth. And he was like leaning forward like Marvel style and kind of like floating,
wow,
subhanallah. And so they like started running after him, and he was getting away. So one of the officers said to the sheikh, "Look, there's no way we're going to catch him. Let's jump in our car and chase him." So they started chasing him. Imagine, subhanallah, Khalid, like this guy is like floating through the air, and they're in a car and they
wow,
can't catch up to him. Subhanallah.
wow,
And then Ustad Tim said that the sheikh, he remembered he didn't do his morning adhkar. So he started like doing his morning adhkar. And once he completed Ayatul Kursi, subhanallah, the guy, he kind of fell, and he was like, like a fidget spinner in the sand. He was like, flipping over, and they managed to catch him, subhanallah. And he said to Tim and the sheikh, he said, look, there were two jinns, they were helping me escape because I have control over them. But as soon as you recite, he said, as soon as you recited Ayatul Kursi, it was so powerful, subhanallah, that they couldn't handle it and they just fled and left me.
wow,
Subhanallah. And then, so that guy, he was then executed. Because, in the Sharia, for
yeah,
magicians, it's a death penalty, even though they may make tawbah, but still they are executed because of the fitna that they cause in society. So
wow. I
now,
mean,
obviously, this is not a mental disorder. This is something from the unseen, right? And this, again, is an eyewitness account from a credible person.
right, and that's something for the skeptics to think about, that and ponder
Yes.
on. How can you try explaining that with some jargon? Can you? I mean,
They'll
yeah.
probably
So
say it's an illusion or something, subhanallah.
right,
But yeah, so there's quite a few learning points, and this is what I reflect on is subhanallah, the power of adhkar, that we as Muslims generally we are very negligent of, for example, reciting the adhkar at night and in the morning, Ayatul Kursi, Surah Al-Ikhlas. These are very powerful protections against the unseen. Subhanallah. You know, even the Prophet ﷺ, he was affected by magic by a Jewish woman, and that's when the muwahadatain was really kind of, you know, revealed to protect, as a protection. Qul a'udhu bi rabbil falaq, and, you know, qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas, and qul huwallahu ahad. So these are things that we need to make sure we teach our families and our children, especially because as Muslims, we are going to be under attack. I think you probably have come across a lot of videos on YouTube recently where there's magicians. Like I saw this video about a Russian lady who's a witch, and she said that my witchcraft works on everybody except Muslims. She said that for some reason they have like a force field, and I'm not able to penetrate it. SubhanAllah. This is coming from, you know, a witch. And then we have Muslims who don't believe that there's you know, these kind of things exist.
Right. And then there are some 2 or 3 stories I've come across, very interesting, where they were non-Muslim magicians in the past, and because of understanding what Islam is, they came to Islam. Like they reverted to Islam because of understanding how there is something there which they cannot use their whatever powers or whatever to penetrate and do something.
Subhanallah.
So that's kind of something to think about.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, these are, and I'll tell you another story. I don't know if you, Sheikh Uthman ibn Farooq, he recently, I think a couple of months ago, maybe a year ago, he described an experience that he, have you heard his experience?
One video I've seen, but I don't know if that's the one you're talking about.
Okay, so Sheikh Uthman, actually preparing for today, I was listening to it. It's very interesting. So obviously Sheikh Uthman, again, he's a very well-known, mashallah, Sheikh and Dai. So he was saying that in San Diego, so he lives in San Diego, he said that there was a brother from the masjid. He called him and said, look, I need your help. And Sheikh Uthman, he said that, look, I'm really busy. I don't have time. And, you know, he said generally he stays away from these kind of issues. But the brother was very persistent. And he said, look, I'm really suffering. I've taken my wife. He had an issue again with his wife. I've taken her to doctors. She's had scans and they've said there's nothing wrong with her. It's a psychological issue. So anyway, after quite a lot of convincing, Sheikh Uthman said, okay, khalas. He called one of his friends who's a Hafid of Quran. He said, let's go to this guy's house and find out what's going on. SubhanAllah. So he said, and he's well known, the family is well known. I think that they own a store. He didn't disclose too much details because he wants to protect them. So he said that before they entered the house, the husband, he was waiting outside. And he told Sheikh Uthman, he said, look, let me tell you what's happening. He said, my wife recently came to the country. She's from the Middle East somewhere. And what happened, basically, she started changing physically. So she had long hair. And he said that's her hair started getting shorter, like without cutting. It just became really short.
Wow.
And he said that, subhanAllah. And he said whenever he tried to approach her in terms of marital relations, her face would change. Her eyes would get dark, you know, and she would become violent and aggressive, subhanAllah. And, you know, in the house, she would like just push the children, you know, randomly, become very aggressive. And this brother, he's working in the bookstore, and he said there was a female employee. So his wife started sending very explicit messages to this female employee. And, you know, he said he read them and he said they were very, and lingo, like, you know, kind of street language. And he said there's no way that she would know it because she recently moved to the US. She couldn't even speak English. But in these messages, she was using very explicit language, you know, and making suggestions to his female employee. So this female employee told his brother, like, look, your wife's like sending me these weird messages, subhanAllah. So anyway, Sheikh Uthman, he's like, this guy's crazy. I don't know what he's on about, kind of thing. So he said, okay, let's go inside. And he said, the sister, she was fully covered. So he said, subhanAllah, he said, as soon as I walked in, the sister, he's like, oh, it's you. He used the N-word. She used the N-word. Is you, Uthman, Sheikh Uthman. He's like, how do you know me, kind of thing, you know. Anyway, he sat down, and so he said that 2 of her sons were holding her, and husband was behind her. And he told the Sheikh, his friend, just continue reciting Quran, don't stop, right? So anyway, he started like reciting, and he said, subhanAllah, the woman, she started like similarly to the first story, she started behaving bizarrely, shouting, getting hysterical. He's like, what's going on? And subhanAllah, he's like, Sheikh Uthman's like, sister, what's wrong? He's like, don't call me sister. I'm not your sister. like speaking fluent English in American
Wow.
slang. And Sheikh Uthman's like, what's going on? And it's a male voice, by the way, right? And he's like,
Oh,
no, man, yo, like N and F, and don't speak to me. I'm not your sister. And subhanAllah, Sheikh Uthman's like, what's going on here? And she was like, they had to restrain her. And he continued talking, subhanAllah. And he's like speaking as a male, and the other sheikh was reciting. And during the course of this, basically, the woman, she tried to like attack Sheikh Uthman. So Sheikh Uthman, like, was ready, and he was like, what's going on here? He was like shocked. Anyway, he continued, and this male was a jinn, again, similar to the first story. And it's an American jinn. And so he told Sheikh Uthman that I fell in love with this sister, so I entered her and I possessed her, and I'm now attracted to that other woman, subhanallah, who's working
wow.
in the shop. That's why I'm sending these messages. And Sheikh Uthman's like shocked, like he's never seen this kind of stuff happening before, and he's like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "Look, man, I love this woman, and this is why I'm not gonna accept this." So anyway, he said, "Look, this went on for like 45 minutes." And he said, "Look, he told the jinn, you need to leave, you need to leave." And anyway, they were like, and then eventually, after like 40 minutes of struggling, the sister collapsed. Subhanallah. So he's like used the opportunity to get out and just leave. And he said, like, I didn't call the brother, I didn't do anything. And then he said he found out the brother went back to the Middle East. And he said, "Look, I'm leaving." He came back a couple of months later, and he met Sheikh Uthman in the masjid, and he said, "Subhanallah, after this session, when I took my wife back, she reverted to her normal self. There was no issues, and there's no way I'm going to bring her
Wow.
back." Subhanallah. So Sheikh Uthman said that most likely this woman was possessed by a jinn, an American jinn, and this is why it was causing the issues. So there was physical change, like her hair became short, and there was obviously the voice was a male voice, and it was causing a lot of problems. Subhanallah. So
Wow.
this is another thing that maybe like this transgender kind of LGBTQ stuff. There could be some element of jinns affecting people psychologically and getting them. Maybe some of them are possessed, and that's why they start changing their gender and that kind of thing. Allahu A'lam.
Oh, wow. Yeah, but then of course we cannot extrapolate that to all
Yeah, exactly,
cases.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. But it's possible, maybe, especially
Yeah.
Muslims, maybe they might have waswas from jinn, or they might be affected by jinn.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
yeah, subhanallah. So yeah,
A
these are
psychiatrist
things.
saying that is shocking, a little shocking, but yeah, interesting at the same time.
Yeah, subhanallah. So this is the thing, Khalid. There's a lot of things out there we're not aware of, and this is why it's really important that we have these kind of discussions. Um, at the same time, like, for example, if somebody is, schizophrenia or psychosis is basically somebody who loses sense of reality. So they start seeing things, they start hearing things, voices telling them to kill themselves, or voices commanding them to harm other people. This is purely a mental illness. So when you give them treatment, like with medication and psychotherapy, they get better. So that's very unlikely to be due to jinn. Although in our community, in the Muslim community, if somebody's like psychotic, they may be mumbling them to themselves. They are, doing weird, bizarre behavior. Automatically, they think, okay, this is jinn. But most of the time, it will be like a psychotic episode. Maybe they've been using drugs. So I work in addiction.
Yeah.
A lot of people who use crystal methamphetamine, they lose sense
So,
of reality. They become psychotic.
yeah, so there is a lot to unpack. So
Yeah,
you
let's
raised
take it. Yeah,
psychosis and schizophrenia. So let's go one by one because we have a lot to unpack now. And good that we start like we I don't know how, but we directly came to the topic of magic, which I thought was very interesting. We might come on that topic
yeah,
later on, but good that we covered some aspects of it. So what
yes,
we learned from those stories, at least if you can recall, is that jinns can affect people mentally also and physically also. We got some
yes,
evidence or at least some anecdotes regarding physical change and
yes,
regarding mental change as well.
yes,
Now, we also want to differentiate and accept that there are some actual mental issues, as you mentioned, that there are three categories which are
yes,
different from jinn afflictions. So
yes,
that
yes,
psychosis and schizophrenia, I don't know, the megalomania, bipolar, all of these are real, you are saying, right?
yes, yes, yes,
And then you said that medication can treat these.
yes,
So
yes,
something like, for example, an antipsychotic medication.
Yes. Yes.
If we give, this is a question. If we give an antipsychotic medication to someone who is affected by jinn, what would happen?
They will not have any benefit from that. They will get side effects from the medication because, as you know, all medications have side effects. So the jinn
Okay.
issue will still persist, and they will just develop side effects. So that's one of the ways that you can distinguish whether there's an issue with jinn or there's an issue
Okay.
with purely mental illness. The response to treatment with medication and psychotherapy.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that's interesting. So if someone is actually just going through psychosis,
Yes.
antipsychotic drugs can actually help them.
Yes.
Uh,
And yeah,
someone who's,
and I want yeah. Go on. Sorry, carry on. Sorry, Khalid. Sorry to interrupt you. Carry on.
no, that's okay. So I
I
was
was just gonna say, I was gonna say just because otherwise I'll forget. Early intervention in mental health is extremely important. Okay, what that means is, as soon as somebody develops a mental disorder, whether that's anxiety, depression, psychosis, substance use, we have to intervene as early as possible. The earlier you intervene, the better the prognosis, right? So unfortunately, especially even in kind of general populations, but in Muslim populations, people tend to present very late, like that maybe the person's been psychotic for 6 months, right? Because of stigma around mental illness. That is very damaging to the individual in terms of their recovery. Okay. So as soon as you feel that your family member, maybe there's some bizarre behavior, there's evidence of hallucinations, and maybe they're talking to themselves, they're reporting that somebody's trying to harm them, they become paranoid, it's really important to seek medical help as soon as possible. It's called duration of untreated psychosis, DUP. Okay, it's well known that the longer the DUP, the worse the prognosis. And these are usually chronic illnesses. So, for example, psychosis, first episode of psychosis, if you don't intervene at an early stage, maybe for the rest of their life, they will have relapses in terms of psychotic episodes. So, it's really important, whilst we're talking about jinns and metaphysical, it's really important to educate people that seek help as soon as possible for any potential mental illness, because that will improve your chance of recovery.
Okay, yeah, I think that was important
Yeah,
because many people they shy away from
exactly.
discussing an issue of mental health that they might think they are going through.
Yeah, and
So
even
there should be.
yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
carry on, Khalid. Carry on.
No, I was just saying that there should be an encouragement on our side for this as well
Yeah.
because
Yes.
this is also where our community is lacking in some way.
Yeah. I mean, for example, sadness and grief, that's normal human emotion. Even the Prophet ﷺ, Amal Huzn, the year of sadness, when he lost his wife and, his uncle. Um, but even depression. So I'll give you, like, I've worked with mashayikh who have experienced depression. These are people who, for example, working in the Awqaf, in the Ministry of Islamic Affairs in Muslim countries. So obviously they're hafid of Quran, mashallah, knowledgeable around fiqh and, hadith, but still they've experienced depression and they required treatment with medication and then they improved. So just to give you an idea that, because there's this myth that if you have weak iman, you're more likely to develop mental illness, or if you have strong iman, there's no way you're going to experience a depressive episode. That's not true. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
if your iman is stronger, you have more resilience because you believe this is the qadr of Allah. If for example, lose a child or any kind of trauma, but it doesn't make you immune. So, like I mentioned, there are mashayikh I've seen who are severely depressed. They required treatment. There's a young guy. He was hafid of Quran. He was experiencing suicidal thoughts, wanting to jump off a roof. This was in Qatar. His father brought him to me. He had a friend who committed suicide, subhanallah, and he had biological depression. Like there was no reason for him to experience these things. I treated him with some antidepressant medication, and subhanallah, he recovered from that depressive episode. So this is also important, that just because you're a practicing Muslim, for example, it doesn't mean that you will not experience a mental illness. And I've had these discussions with Ustad Tim Humble, and he said this is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If somebody has, mashallah, strong iman, maybe Allah will test them with mental illness, right? So they need to seek help and treatment, and we need to be compassionate as a Muslim community, as families, towards people. Like, for example, if you fracture your arm, everybody's going to say, oh, go to the hospital, get an x-ray and see an orthopedic surgeon and get it repaired. But if your mind is fractured, okay, people like, no, you're fine, you'll get over it, kind of thing. SubhanAllah, it doesn't make sense, right? If you think about a fracture, imagine your mind, there's a fracture, there's a crack in your mind. You need help, you need support. Allah says, seek knowledge from those who have knowledge. That's not just Islamic knowledge, it's specialists in all areas, right? Like I have no ideas about cars. I love cars, but if I have an issue with a car, I'm not going to try and fix it myself. I'm going to take it to a mechanic, right? So, but for some reason around mental illness, we don't want to seek the expert opinion and help. And sometimes it's justified, because sometimes you have doctors, psychiatrists, unfortunately, who don't practice very well, or they don't do evidence-based practice. They just give them lots of medications, make them zombies, and then people, kind of become dysfunctional as well.
I completely agreed. That what you said, that reminds me one quote actually of something from a quote from Guy, which was a well-known well-known psychologist, Guy, which he uses that he used that example that generally when when we have a mental issue, people can say, oh, it will heal on its own, just leave it there, it will heal on its own. But we won't do that with, for example, a fracture on his on our leg, or a wound. Like, he wouldn't say, "Oh, just you have a fracture in your leg is broken. Just walk it off; it will be fine on its own."
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So the same way he says that for some mental health issues, we need to consult a professional. And unfortunately, regarding our ummah specifically, I think the issue here with mental illness comes is because I think there is no societal acceptance of that issue. People might be scared to approach a mental health professional because they might think that if others come to know that they are doing something like that, they might think that they've gone crazy. So that is what we have to work on, that anyone can have a mental health issue, and it can be a minor issue also. That does not mean someone has become crazy altogether.
Exactly. People falsely equate mental disorder with psychosis. The vast majority. So if you look at the data, 1 in 4 worldwide people experience a mental disorder. Okay, it can most commonly, it's a mood disorder, things like anxiety, depression, bipolar, psychosis, substance use as well. I'm working in addiction. SubhanAllah, there's a big epidemic of substance use in Muslims, right? And again, our approach should be one of compassion, not one of stigma and judgment, right? Even I think you might be aware, there's a Sahabi, Nu'man ibn Bashir, I believe his name was. He was actually an alcoholic. During the time of the Prophet ﷺ, he had an issue with alcohol dependence, and he couldn't stop. And he used to get punished. Obviously, in Islam, you have the Sharia, there's punishment for being publicly intoxicated. I believe it's around 80 to 100 lashes. So imagine, subhanAllah, imagine if the Prophet ﷺ in front of you and you're there intoxicated, right? I mean, psychologically, you can't imagine that. But this Sahabi, he had this issue. And at one point, there's an authentic narration that some of the Sahaba, they became very frustrated with this guy. They started cursing him, that how can you be drinking? And, the Prophet ﷺ is here. And, hurling abuse. And subhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ, he stopped the Sahaba and said, look, don't do that. Because by Allah, this person, he loves me and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala extremely, passionately, and I love him. So, be compassionate towards him and support him and help him, right? So if this is the attitude of the Prophet ﷺ towards somebody who has this issue, then as Muslims, we should support, we shouldn't be judgmental towards people who have an issue with addiction. Addiction is a brain disease. So you have dopamine, which is a reward hormone in your brain. When you take a drug, you get a surge of dopamine. That's why people then become addicted, because they seek that high, that craving from the dopamine release. So once they become dependent, then it's very difficult for them to stop, even though they want to stop, right? So I again, mental illness, addiction, we need to support people. We need to help people with these issues.
Okay, so this is a fascinating topic. And just before we dive deep into the topic of addictions and stuff like that, one question that I have.
Sure.
Regarding schizophrenia and psychosis, which you mentioned that there are these 3 categories, and one is plainly a mental health issue, another is only a jinn affliction, nothing psychological, and the third is both.
Yes.
So, for example, if someone is going through psychosis and schizophrenia, maybe antipsychotic drugs might help, but the same drug might not help someone who's going through a gene affliction. But
Yes.
regarding the
Yes.
third category, if a person is going through the third category, if a person is taking antipsychotic drugs, what would happen?
So yeah, very good question, mashallah. So this is where we use a holistic approach, and even in mental health, we use biopsychosocial and spiritual. So we have biological treatments, we have
Yeah.
psychological treatments like talking therapies, like CBT, for example. We have
Mm.
social interventions, working with the family, family therapy. Maybe there's issues with it, with the family conflict, that kind of thing. And then we have spiritual. So, for example, in Qatar, where I was working before coming here, we had a sheikh, Sheikh Badruddin, his name is, and he was part of the hospital. He was employed by the hospital to deliver spiritual intervention through Ruqyah, for example. Also,
Oh,
yeah, subhanallah, and also interventions in terms of getting them to pray regularly, giving them halaqah around hadith. So it was
wow.
integrated into the treatment plan. Even patients in their recovery, they would be taken for umrah. So this is called motivational kind of treatment, where you give obviously they're Muslim patients, you give them this kind of hope and connection, improve their connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. So to answer your question, if somebody has psychosis and also a jinn issue, the medication will reduce the effect of the, say, hallucinations or any illusions that they may have, but it will not treat the jinn issue. For that, you need to have
Mm.
a combination of
Okay.
biological treatments and spiritual interventions through ruqyah, for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
One more thing, if we, I would like to touch on, which is you mentioned that either one of these, like not the third category, but the first category, having a gene affliction
Yes.
or having a mental issue, makes it more susceptible for you to have the another one as well. You can
Yes.
address that
Yes.
briefly. That is what you
Yeah.
mentioned.
So if somebody says depressed, right, has
Mm.
biological depression, what we say, so they have less serotonin in their brain, they may become hopeless, right? They may start experiencing suicidal thoughts. So then they
Mm.
become vulnerable to being attacked by the unseen, by, say, shayateen or jinn,
Okay.
because obviously the role of jinns, especially the other thing is, sorry, there's a lot of stuff we're talking about. There's Muslim jinns, obviously they worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the ones that affect us are non-Muslim jinns, maybe Hindu jinns, atheists. Subhanallah, they have their religions as well. So this individual, say they become severely depressed, they haven't sought treatment, they start experiencing suicidal thoughts, they want to end their life, they're a Muslim. Now you could imagine a jinn can use that opportunity, because this person is in a vulnerable state, right? So maybe this
Mm.
then they will start experiencing a jinn commanding them to kill themselves. Maybe the jinn will start
Oh.
doing waswas and attacking this person. That, look, because they're already suffering, so
Mm.
this is an opportunity for a jinn to attack this person and get them to maybe commit shirk or even kill themselves. Suicide obviously is haram, right? So that's a
Mm.
potential way that jinns could exploit vulnerable mental states.
Oh.
Similarly, somebody who's got psychosis, because they have psychosis and they're having treatment, potentially during that period of treatment, a jinn might say, okay, this guy is vulnerable. Everybody's convinced, and he does have a psychotic illness, but let me play some games with him. And then the jinn starts, causing issues, which means that the treatment becomes limited in terms of its effectiveness, right? Which then could
Mm.
potentially cause the doctors or the treatment team to think, okay, this medication's not working. Let's try another medication or add in more medication. So that's a potential way that, again, I don't have evidence. This is anecdotal evidence, right? This is from my life
Mm.
experience, because as you can imagine, it's very difficult to measure unseen
Right.
metaphysical things, right?
Right.
And this is one of the challenges. This is why
Yeah.
it's
So
really
that's
important to develop brothers and sisters who have expertise in mental health in terms of psychiatry, psychology, but also have Islamic knowledge and work within an Islamic paradigm, and educate, say, many scholars on this issue. So this is why I work closely with, for example, Ustad Tim and other mashayikh, and so we teach people that, look, this is holistic approach that we need to take. It's very important.
Right. And because there is a lot of specialization in every field, all of these subjects become very,
Correct.
peculiar in focusing only one area. But now, if you want treatment, there should be a holistic approach, because all of these things are, I believe, affecting each other. Our physical body also affects
Yes.
our mind affects our body, our spiritual state affects our body and our mind, and vice versa.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Um, what do you want to move on to next?
Yeah. So now it's a very important topic which I unfortunately had, stopped you in between, which you were talking about, which is addiction being rampant within our ummah. And
Yes.
what is very interesting, I think, which you have mentioned previously, which I want my audience to know, is substance abuse, like use of drugs, and how they can also potentially have a connection with jinn, because many people,
Yes.
when they take some kind of drugs, they
Yes.
see some kind of jinn encounters, and this is
Yes.
cross cultural, and also the kind of stories that they report have some consistency within them, so we can't just
Correct.
this is what I know. You correct me if I'm wrong. So specifically, I think you're working on something like meth. I think it's
Yes.
methylamphetamine, which is also rampant in the Naruma, unfortunately. And when people take
Yes.
this, they see jinn encounters. Can you address this topic?
Yeah. So within addiction, obviously we have different types of substances that people become addicted to. So alcohol, opioids, for example, heroin, is very common. But subhanallah, I would say in the last 2 years, methamphetamine, there's an epidemic of abuse of methamphetamine, crystal meth. They have different names, both Muslims and non-Muslims. Now, what's really interesting, subhanAllah, so when you take certain types of drugs, they're called hallucinogens or stimulants, you can develop psychotic symptoms, like you can experience hallucinations, you can become paranoid. And I've seen people who've used crystal meth, patients, and I've discussed with Ustad Tim, he's also, subhanAllah, come across this. There are certain people who, when they take crystal meth, they report being open to experiencing the metaphysical, okay, which is separate to the psychotic experience. So I'll give you an example. I saw a patient. He's actually a forensic patient.
Mm-hmm.
What that means is he committed a serious crime, and he was jailed, and then he was referred to hospital for assessment to check whether he had criminal responsibility, whether he had capacity when he did the crime. And obviously in Islam, the hadith mentions that the pen is lifted from three people, and one is the majnoon, the one who doesn't have their mental ability to make the correct decision. So this patient, he mentioned, he's actually an Egyptian patient. He moved to the Emirates a couple of years ago. And when he was in Egypt, he was using cannabis. And we know there's a very strong link between cannabis or hashish, weed, and psychosis, right? And this is well established. Unfortunately, again, this is another area which we can touch on. People don't consider cannabis as a big issue, and it's very kind of normalized. Obviously, in places like the US, it's legalized. In Canada, in Holland, and there are people now trying to lobby for Muslim countries to legalize cannabis. It is one of the most dangerous drugs in terms of causing mental illness, in terms of causing psychosis and potentially schizophrenia. Okay, so that's something to point out. Anyway, this brother, so he was using cannabis for a couple of years, and then he moved to the Emirates. He was a mechanic, and he started using methamphetamine. Okay, subhanallah. So when I was interviewing him, he said to me that when he started using methamphetamine, after some time, he started seeing jinn. Okay, and he described the jinn like a very short with big shadows and very scary, and they started commanding him to do things like harm other people. So he started losing sense of reality, and the urges were very strong. He tried to resist them. He tried to stop the meth. He couldn't. Eventually, he started getting messages through his phone that he needs to kill 6 people. Okay, and if he doesn't kill 6 people, he's going to go to the hellfire. He obviously he doesn't want to go to Jahannam, right? So these messages started telling him that he needs to kill 6 people, 2 Indians, 2 Pakistanis, and 2 Egyptians, very specific. And if he doesn't, he's going to enter Jahannam. So he tried to resist, but subhanAllah, one night he said around 3 o'clock in the morning, the urges were so strong that he got a knife, and he was staying with two Egyptian brothers. He cut their throat and killed them, two of them.
Oh my God.
Subhanallah. He went. There were two Pakistani guys next door. Alhamdulillah, they'd locked their door, so he tried to break in. He couldn't. Then he ran down the street and he was looking for some Indian guys to kill. He said, I came across some brothers sitting outside a masjid, and he was just sitting. And he said, I asked him, are you Indian? He said, yes. So he got like a brick. He smashed him on the head with the brick. He got a bottle. He broke a bottle and he slit his throat. And by that time, the police turned up and then he was taken away. Obviously, it's the two Egyptian brothers, unfortunately, they passed away. The Indian brother, alhamdulillah, he survived. I don't know how, qadar Allah, he survived. So when he was talking to me, he started saying, look, I'm a Muslim, right? And I know I have a psychotic illness, but this experience was definitely a jinn issue. I can tell that he was telling me I can tell the difference when I have hallucinations, and this thing around jinns was completely different. Okay,
wow,
subhanallah. So that's
that
one
was
example. Yeah, it's subhanallah. It's really like interesting. Like again, like I mentioned, when you're in vulnerable state, so when you're using drugs, you're in a vulnerable state, and potentially jinns can exploit that situation, right? I'll tell you another patient story. Obviously, I'm not disclosing who they are, so I'm keeping it anonymous. There's another patient I saw. Again, he was imprisoned and he was sent for assessment, mental health assessment. So he basically was burning houses. He used to burn arson. He used to set fire to houses, and this was happening quite regularly. The civil defense, or here we call them civil defense or fire engines, they came and they basically used to set out the fires. So what happened is that he eventually set fire to a house. In the
country
Gulf.
Was this?
One of the countries
in the Gulf? Okay,
in the Gulf. Yeah, I don't want to mention specifically, but
that's fine. No, just I wanted the audience to know that these are Muslim countries, so
yeah, in the Gulf. Yeah. So anyway, so when I interviewed him, subhanallah, he had been treated, so he did have like again a psychotic illness, but he said to me, he said, Dr. Abu Isa, I know that jinns were affecting me. I said, how? He said, even now whilst I'm sitting here, there's a jinn, my qareen. Qareen is basically, for those who don't know, every person has a qareen, like a jinn who accompanies us, who knows everything about us. He said, my qareen is speaking to your qareen right now, and I can tell what you're thinking because the qareen is telling me. I said, wow. So he told me, he said, I said, like, what? Yeah,
I'm saying this is becoming more interesting than I expected. Yeah, go ahead.
So he then told me that I said, like, why did you set fire to these houses? He said, look, jinns used to come to me and used to challenge me that, look, if you are a wali of Allah, if you're a Muslim, prove to us by setting fire to this house and surviving, because you claim that Allah will protect you. So set fire to this house and then prove to us that you are close to Allah. So they started challenging him, subhanallah, that set fire to these houses, and he started doing it. And the only way he stopped was because he was arrested, because his brother's family was in one house and they almost died from the fire. So then he got arrested and then he received treatment. He said even whilst I was interviewing him, he said, I can see jinn in this room right now, and they're telling me not to speak to you.
Wow. Yeah. That is fascinating.
Subhanallah. Yeah.
Subhanallah. May Allah protect us. May Allah protect. Allah. So we get to learn many things from what you mentioned. Yes. That you have come across many patients who have gone through both mental health issues and jinn afflictions, and they can even differentiate between both of them. They themselves can do it. Yeah. Assalamu alaikum.
I told you whenever I talk, something happens.
And I was wondering if that was the case, like, that some technical issue happened.
Yeah, it was a technical issue, but unexplainable.
Yeah, so I don't even remember what I was talking about when,
we were talking about crystal meth and jinn possession. Yeah.
And what I was that I remember, but what I was I was just talking about what we learn from these stories.
Yes.
Is that you yourself have come across many patients who come who fall within the third category, which
Yes.
is actually experiencing both, and they themselves, through their testimonies, they're saying that they can differentiate between both. So this is
Yes.
kind of fascinating that they can say, okay, they can differentiate an hallucination from actually jinn speaking to them.
Yes. Yes.
So that is
Yes.
something to note. One more thing that before this discussion, I did a lot of research on meth, and so that I can get some insights maybe. And what I found out was, like, some uh websites, and some like resources mention that methamphetamine addicts report appearance of shadow people around prolonged periods of sleep deprivation. Psychiatrist Jack Potts suggests that methamphetamine usage adds a conspiratorial component to the sleep deprivation hallucination. One
Mm.
interviewed subject said that you don't see shadow dogs or shadow birds or shadow cars. You see shadow people standing in doorways, walking behind you, coming
Subhanallah.
at you in the sidewalk. These hallucinations have been directly compared to paranormal entities described in folklore. So,
Subhanallah. Subhanallah. Yeah, this is something recently I that's why I think it was in November I had a discussion with Ustad Tim, and I think we maybe will do some work on this, like maybe try and
wow.
do some case reports, because it's a theme that I'm seeing. And obviously now you've quoted this person. I wasn't aware about this person also mentioning this. Um so it seems to maybe somehow to open the door to the unseen, specifically
Yeah.
methamphetamine. I know, like ayahuasca, this is like a type of hallucinogen that people go to, like Latin America, and they have these spiritual kind of experiences or retreats. Um, I know they describe like being able to see stuff, which is terrifying. Allahu alam what that is about, but definitely,
Mm.
like for example, people who are using heroin, they don't report this experience.
Okay.
Even people who use cannabis and become psychotic, they don't report this experience. There's something about methamphetamine and this shadowy Allahu alam jinns, whether that it opens a door for that person to be affected by jinns, Allahu alam.
Yeah, and then one more thing I had to ask you. This is kind of a very fascinating topic. There's one Muslim, like, if you are aware of IREP, Islamic Research into Exotic Phenomena, do you know?
No,
There's
I'm
one
not
new
aware of them.
community.
No, no.
Okay, so there's one new community that Muslims have formulated, which
Okay,
have formed, which is exactly researching on these subjects. Maybe you should
okay.
also be a part of this community, and add your
Inshallah,
insights.
inshallah. Yeah,
So
I'm not aware of them. Yeah.
so they also have been reported that they have come across many people. I think, if I remember correctly, in one of their discussions, they were mentioning, like, while doing Ruqyah, people who do a lot of meth, they also get possessed by jinns a lot, and that is also where we can see this relation.
So yes, exactly, exactly. Um, Yeah, and this thing about medically unexplained symptoms. I'll give you two stories from the UK, with a Libyan sheikh I was working with. So he mentioned to me that a family contacted him. So we were in Manchester, and the family contacted him in another city and said, "Look, we need your help." So he used to do Ruqyah basically. So the community knew about him. So he
Mm.
went to see this family, and it was a young sister. I believe she was maybe 19, 20. And the family said, look, she suddenly stopped talking. She became mute. She was doing
Mm.
fine. Then suddenly she stopped talking. And they'd taken her to all the doctors, the specialists, neurologists. She had scans, she had blood tests. And the doctor said, look, there's no obvious cause for her to become mute. Maybe she experienced some trauma, and her body shut down. So this is something called conversion disorder. Okay, so that's basically, and this is actually does happen. So somebody who maybe has experienced severe trauma, maybe some sexual abuse or whatever, their body can react in a way where it shuts down. Okay, so this Sheikh Ali, his name is, he actually went to the house and he sat with this family and the sister. So he tried to speak to her. Obviously, she's mute. What's interesting was when he started doing ruqya, she started getting distressed, subhanallah. Okay, this is a common theme as well if there's an issue with jinn. She started
Mm.
becoming distressed. And but she couldn't speak. So
Wow.
he thought, okay, let me give her some paper. So he gave her paper, and she started like drawing these. He showed me the drawing, subhanallah. She started drawing these like really dark like circles. I don't know if you've seen the movie The Ring, like, can she started drawing these like really intense dark circles, and then like these kind of like shadowy kind of figures. So he started doing Ruqyah, and subhanallah, after some time she started talking, but it was not her, it was a male person speaking Arabic again. So it was a jinn. It was a jinn. And so the jinn told Sheikh Ali, look, I think they're an Indian family. There's a magician in India. He commanded me to come and cause problems for this girl, and I'm holding her tongue. Like he described that I'm holding her tongue, which is why she cannot speak. Which is why she's become mute, and she was not able to even, express what was going on. So Sheikh Ali continued to do Ruqyah. Eventually, the jinn left, and she started talking. And she said, "Look, I was trying to talk, but I couldn't talk." And the family then went back to the doctors, and they were like shocked, like what happened, and they couldn't understand like how she suddenly started talking so quickly without any treatment from their perspective.
Subhanallah.
Subhanallah. Yeah. And he mentioned another similar story. So there was a girl, again, female. She suddenly became paralyzed. She couldn't walk. She had to sit in a wheelchair, right? Same thing. The family took her to doctors, neurologists. She had CT, MRI scans. There was no obvious cause. There was no accident, nothing. So then again, they said, look, she's got some psychological issue, which is why she's not walking. So just support her and take her to a psychiatrist or something. So they contacted Sheikh Ali again. The same thing. He went. He just started doing Ruqyah, and then this time two jinns started conversing with him, and said to him, "Look, we're basically preventing her from walking because of black magic, because of sihr. Somebody's done sihr on her, and we are refusing to leave." And then again, he did Ruqyah. They left, and she started walking. So yeah. So this is subhanallah. Again, these are real kind of stories. People think this is like, fiction, but actually it's real life. And unless you are exposed to this kind of stuff, it's hard to believe.
Yeah, and then there are many, to be very honest, there are many fake
there's a lot of
as well.
exactly.
So
Charlatans,
sometimes I believe because of those fake stories, and sometimes they get exposed, these fake stories, they get exposed. People then have this tendency, okay, then everything is fake. But no, there are some real stories as well. And we need to also be open to the idea of, yes, these things can be real. Some skeptics, they start off from the assumption that, oh, this can't be real because they are materialistic. The world is materialistic.
Yeah. And like you said, go on. Sorry, carry on, Khalid. Sorry.
So I'm saying the possibility of these also happening, they cannot make sense of that.
Yeah. And I think you made a very good point. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people who are scammers, basically. I would call them scammers.
Yeah.
They call them spiritual or religious therapists. And they don't follow the Quran and Sunnah. They just want to make money. Maybe they will plant people who, like, similarly in a wheelchair, and suddenly, I don't know if you've seen this guy called Peer Chuf Chuf. He's very famous. He's like, basically, maybe you can search him on Google. He basically goes, and he causes people to heal from all these diseases. He's basically a scammer. So this is, you're right. This also causes people to become skeptical that, it must, this is not true, and these people are just crazy and lunatics, basically. I've even come across people who went to these, dodgy guys who would tell them, okay, sacrifice a chicken and put the blood of the chicken on the person, on your family member, and that will heal them. Even ta'weez as well, amulets. Subhanallah, a lot of these guys, they're actually magicians, so they will cause more problems. I think you've seen videos of this, a lot of them on the internet. Even Tim told me about this, that they pretend, okay, we're going to heal you, but then they cast spells on that person. When you open up the ta'weez, it's actually got Quranic ayat written backwards, and all this kind of weird stuff.
Right. I mean, unfortunately, that this is very rampant in the Indian subcontinent altogether. India, Pakistan, it was very, and you won't believe, like, having some conversations with non-Muslims, they themselves actually go to these fake,
Yes.
like these magicians who pretend to be priests, and they go to the Muslim ones because they say those are more effective.
Yes.
Astaghfirullah.
Subhanallah.
So
Subhanallah.
so so
Yeah.
non-Muslims also go to them thinking that they have some power or something and they can help them. But
Exactly.
yes,
Exactly.
this is something we also have to explain, because there is a lot of confusion regarding this topic, which is that many of these practices that they do go completely beyond the boundaries of the Sharia, beyond the
Yes.
boundaries of
Yes.
what is allowed in our religion. So we have to be
Exactly.
very careful what kind of person we approach, and what
Exactly.
are they
Exactly.
doing basically.
Yeah.
They might
The
say
other
this
thing.
is
Yeah.
Ruqyah, but this not might be Ruqyah. It might be
Yeah.
something else. They might not.
It might be magic. A lot of the time it's
Yeah,
magic. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And I think the other thing to advise people is to do self ruqya. So Ustad Tim Humble, he's very strong advocate for self ruqya. You don't have to go to somebody to get ruqya done. You can do ruqya on yourself. You can
Mhm.
do ruqya on your family members. Ruqya is basically just reciting Quran and making dua to Allah. There's no specific, prescription for ruqya. Obviously Surah Al-Baqarah
Mhm.
has a lot of benefits, and there's narrations about Surah Al-Baqarah, like we said, the muhadatain, kul a'udhu bi rabbil falaq, kul a'udhu bi nas, ayatul kursi. You can do ruqya on yourself as well, and that's equally effective. It's not
Right,
like you have to find somebody to go and do ruqya for you.
right.
Yeah.
There is one book, I think, which is very. I don't know if you've read that book,
Which
which
one?
is one. The Jinn and Human Sickness: The Remedies in Light of the Quran and Sunnah by Dr. Mundhir Khalil Ibn Ibrahim Amin, his name, which basically is also, I don't know, which explains how, like, if you're affected by jinn, like, from the Quran and Sunnah, what remedies can you take?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So
Correct.
I
Correct.
don't know exactly like everything in this book.
Mm.
I've read bits and pieces of this book and I felt it was interesting. So maybe I thought maybe we can
Yeah.
like give some references to people. Some one video by Sheikh Tim Humble, which is on self
Yes.
Ruqyah. I think he has a full
He
playlist
has a
on.
full series. That's the best recommendation I would give. He's, mashallah, I
Yes,
think he's probably one of the best in terms of this topic. He's an expert, and he has a lot of experience. Allahumma barik. So I would recommend people, your brothers and sisters who are watching, to watch his series on jinn, black magic,
yeah.
ruqya, self ruqya. I think is really, really, mashallah, Allahumma barik, very resourceful.
Definitely. I being a person who's mostly like, consumed all of that content, the
Yeah.
Black Magic series and stuff like that, I have benefited a lot from it. So yes, I would completely recommend something like that for someone who needs to go in depth in terms of how to
Yes.
deal with these issues and
And the
understanding
other
this in
thing,
depth.
yeah. And the other thing is everything he says is from authentic sources. It's not, random sources that has no, authentic reference.
Right,
So this is important. I think that's another message, that please find the right people, and make
right,
sure there's evidence, there's dalil from Quran and
right.
Sunnah for whatever intervention that these guys that you go to are telling you.
Okay, so I definitely agree with you. Now, another very important question, and I don't know, like, if you might have come across something like this, which is some people also report sleep deprivation can give them some possible views of, like, looking at shadowy figures that can be hallucinations or that can be jinn. I don't know. So what do you think about sleep deprivation?
Yes, sleep deprivation is well known to cause psychotic symptoms, so hallucinations. So, for example, Guantanamo Bay, the torture methods
Mm.
that were implemented on the Muslims, subhanallah, were actually devised by psychologists and psychiatrists, and it was based on sensory deprivation. So the brothers who were imprisoned there in Guantanamo, they would be prevented from sleeping for days. Okay, now, if you prevent somebody from sleeping for days, you will cause them to become psychotic. They lose sense of reality. They might start hearing things. They might start seeing things. Okay. Similarly, they would put loud, heavy metal music on their ears like 24 hours a day for maybe like a week. And so that intense sound, continuous, also induced like a psychotic illness. Similarly, very cold temperatures. So they would put the AC on full blast, and they would. So it would mean that the brothers who were there, they would not be able to sleep, and they would then develop. So yes, this is well known that if you have any sensory deprivation, especially sleep, you can start hallucinating. I personally haven't come across this and jinns, right? I think it's very explainable biologically.
Okay.
I personally haven't. There may be a link for those who use stimulants like amphetamines, because as you know, when you use amphetamines, it gives you extra energy and boost. So they tend not to sleep. So maybe in those kind of patients where they're not sleeping, secondary to amphetamines, they might start experiencing something related to the metaphysical jinns, etc.
Okay.
But if it's purely somebody, like if I tell you, if I force you not to sleep for 3 days, you will start experiencing some weird kind of illusions and hallucinations. There's also something called hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucination. So these are basically well known. So when you're falling asleep, you might misperceive normal stimuli as a hallucination. And similarly, when you're waking up, you might see something or hear something, but it's just an illusion. Your mind is playing trick on you. These are well known phenomena. So this is not something related to the metaphysical.
Okay. Even though some people have argued, so I don't know, Allah knows best.
I mean, again, there's no way to test it, right? I'm just telling you from my experience and from the evidence that I've seen. Allahu alam. Allahu alam. It's possible, but it's not like a direct link. It's not like, okay, if you're asleep, yeah, it's possible.
Yes. Okay. So one video I had come across, which is very interesting. You know this brother Sneeko?
Yes.
Yeah, so he was interviewing, I think, someone, and I don't know who that person was, but he was mentioning that he's done some research on it, and he was saying that, after sleep deprivation, what many people report seeing shadowy figures after sleep deprivation, and that he said that he said that it's very much likely that those are jinn. To which Sneeko said that, he was a non-Muslim before, and then he became, reverted. So he said that he used to take Adderall before. And when he used to take Adderall, he also used to see those figures. And Adderall also keeps you awake, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, Adderall is a stimulant, yes. Yeah.
So this is also something, an area of research. It's open. Maybe we don't know. Allah knows best. But there can be some research on this subject.
Yeah, exactly. Allahu alam. We don't know. Like I said, it can be a red herring as well. You see, the thing is, maybe you would be affected by jinn irrespective of whether you had sleep deprivation or not. We don't know. Or it could be a gateway as well. Allahu alam. We don't know.
Right.
Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept the unseen for a reason that we don't know about it, except for what's been revealed through authentic sources. We know it exists, but we don't know with this dimension how they interact with us and what can open up. We know, for example, magic is haram. Harut and Marut, in the Quran, it mentions the angels were sent down to teach people magic as a test. We know there is a long history of magic being taught as a science for such a long time. So this is from the time of Babylon, right? So there is a way for people to interact with jinn. There is, for example, Ouija boards. There, when these people they start interacting through Ouija boards and kind of watching all these kind of weird stuff, going to graveyards, trying to summon spirits. There are ways, and there are even some scholars. For example, Imam Anwar al-Awlaki, he did something about. He mentioned that there's an initiation. So if you want to get control of jinn, they'll make you commit shirk. So they will make you, do disgusting things like drink menstrual blood or defecate on the Quran, and then do sajda to the jinn, and then they allow you to gain some power through that. So we do know that you can interact with jinn. There is specific ways you can do that, but then that's kufr, right? And shirk. So yeah, right. You know what I mean? So there is well known, and many of these magicians, they have given up on their akhirah and they've got control of some jinns and they're able to do things with the help of jinn.
Right. Yeah. So now that we open another can of worms, this is a very big topic to talk about. Maybe it's good to maybe address what exactly black magic is. Like, are we talking? What is black magic? So if you can go on a basic level.
What so I mean, very basically, magic is something that in the Islamic paradigm is recognized. It's from the authentic sources. Like I mentioned, Harut, Marut, the two angels that were sent to teach people magic. Magic is basically a way to sihr, to interact with the ghaib, right? With evil forces, with demonic forces, which are shayateen, right? So Iblis, he made a promise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he will attack humankind from all directions. Now, what is the one sin that will prevent us from entering Jannah is shirk, right? So ultimately, he wants us to commit shirk. So magic is basically a way for you to interact, for somebody to interact with the unseen, and gain some advantage over other people, cause harm to other people through the use of demonic forces. That, in a basic nutshell, is my understanding of magic. So if I want to cause you harm, for example, and jealousy and hatred, what was the main sin, the first sin of Iblis? It was jealousy, right? It was pride. Ana khayrun min. I'm better than him. خلقتني من نار وخلقته من طين. You created me from fire and you created him from clay. So this jealousy and this pride may lead somebody to cause harm. To say somebody has a nice house or has a beautiful wife, and this other person starts feeling jealous. So shaitan will instigate intense feelings, negative feelings, which may lead this person then to seek assistance from demonic forces through magic. So then they will commit shirk or kufr, and then be able to cause harm, obviously by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the jinns can then cause harm to this person. So this is essentially what is magic.
Okay. And I think maybe some references on magic. First of all, Satim Humble series, which is very insightful in this. People can watch that on YouTube. There might be a playlist related to that. Secondly, I think there's another series on channel known as Many Prophets, One Message, about Islam and the occult. So I think there are 5 to 6 parts related to that. And this third part and the sixth part, I think, are very essential, related to aspects of magic, as to why these devils want people to behave in such a way, and some explanations are given regarding that, which are insightful. I think they're short for time because that's not our main focus. So I don't want to spend more time on this. Maybe we can have another
episode,
inshallah. So I have a lot to actually talk about regarding many different topics. Regarding magic, I think we've understood some aspects of magic where people do interact with jinns, and they think that this is a gain for them, but overall it's a loss. And as it is mentioned in the Quran, that we know that it communicating with the jinn and trying to have some benefit is in the end eventually going to be a loss for them. It's going to increase them in what's the word in the Quran? It's going to increase them in
ghafla or heedlessness.
I think so. There's one specific word which Allah talks about, that it's only going to increase their problem instead of actually help them. So
I think you're right. Maybe we can, Khalid, maybe we're going an hour and a half. Maybe we can finish towards now and maybe do another episode at some point. What do you think?
Sure.
I'll mention a very interesting story again. Sheikh Uthman mentioned this story. To tell you that it's not just Muslims, by the way, even non-Muslims. The occult. What is the occult? Have you heard of the Church of Satan? The Church of Satan. Alexander LaFay. He was basically one of the founders of the Church of Satan in the US. And they believe in human sacrifice, subhanallah. And you know what the Satanists talk about? They talk about targeting children and doing human sacrifice of children, because children are very innocent and the closest thing to perfection and people who can enter Jannah, right? So the shayateen, they make them sacrifice children as a way to challenge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also cause a lot of harm. Anyway, so Sheikh Uthman, he was interviewing there was a model, and that this guy, he was like a model, and he was involved in a celebrity kind of culture in the US. and he had a girlfriend who also became Muslim later. Sorry, she was Muslim, but she was not practicing. So anyway, he was like interacting with these famous celebrities, people like, these musicians, and he was telling Sheikh Uthman that he saw really like dark stuff. In the middle of the night, these celebrities coming. It had an altar. I can't remember which celebrity is some musician, and they would like do these weird like sacrifices, and he even witnessed some child sacrifice, like human sacrifice, wearing these robes and kind of worshiping Satan. He mentioned that his girlfriend, who was then became his wife, she was a makeup artist and she was very good. And one of the Hollywood directors wanted to hire her, right? So he flew her out to Los Angeles, and they took her out for dinner. And he was telling the story. He said that basically, whilst they was having dinner, he started speaking to someone else, and it was a bit weird. So she's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "No, no, just be quiet." So he was like having an interaction with somebody she couldn't see, and then he's like,
Wow.
"Look, this is a spirit that I'm interacting with." He's a non-Muslim. So she started like freaking out, like, "What's going on here? It's something not right." Even though she wasn't a practicing Muslim, she still had this belief, like, in the unseen, etc. So she started like getting a bit like freaked out by this guy. So he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna give you like a multi-million-dollar contract. It's yours. You're gonna be working with all these Hollywood actors in movies, etc." So obviously it's a big thing. So he said, okay, she's started taking her on a tour of Los Angeles, and subhanallah, he took her to the graveyard and took her to the grave of Michael Jackson. Okay.
Wow.
So she's like, "What the heck is this?" And he's like, "Look, the contract is yours, but you need to on one condition." And she's like, "What?" He said, "You have to prostrate to this grave of Michael Jackson."
Wow.
And subhanallah, she said that when he said that, and he was, by the way, still interacting with this unseen thing. And he said, look, you're going to be famous, you're going to make so much money. So he said that she started saying like Ayatul Kursi. And then as soon as she completed Ayatul Kursi, his face changed. He became like agitated. And he's like, "No way, I'm not going to give you this contract. Get out of here." And she just jumped in the taxi and kind of ran away from there. So this is a very
Wow.
famous, he didn't name it, but this is a very famous celebrity director of Hollywood movies. So the
Wow.
music industry, this Hollywood, it's very satanic, and even non-Muslims talk about this. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube of, for example, practicing Christians, evangelicals. They talk about the satanic culture within the media industry, music and film. So
Yeah,
this is very very scary.
that's another can of worms that maybe we can talk about. And of course, this is very scary. Regarding one guest that I had previously, his name is Farooq McDermott. You know the guy?
No, I don't know him. No.
Okay, so he's a revered brother. He is also he goes in depth into this subject, and also links it to the UFO phenomena, UAP phenomena, NHI and stuff like that. Last discussion that I had with him, he was mentioning Alex Jones. He is a host, a famous
Alex
host.
Jones, yeah, I know Alex Jones, yeah.
So he was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he was explaining how he was in a party within, I think somewhere in the US, where he saw all of the celebrities and they were doing this ritual so he allegedly mentioned that there were fake dummies of babies or something, and they were doing something like that, and a statue of an owl or something like that.
Yes,
they were worshiping
yes.
that, and that was also kind of very interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
That
I think it's Khalid's really scary because a lot of our youth and even our uh, general families, they watch these movies. They listen to music. Music is another thing we can talk about. Music is a medium through which magic can be penetrated into people's lives. There's so much about the lyrics, and even, for example, quite a few famous people who worked with, for example, Puff Diddy and all these kind of celebrities. They talk about and they're now Christian. You can search on YouTube. They talk about becoming possessed when they're writing music, using drugs to then become possessed. And during concerts, they report that they don't know how, but they're able to produce music which affects the people. Gets them into like a trance. And he specifically mentioned that these guys, they start doing chanting before they produce a music video. They start doing all this kind of weird stuff, using weird kind of drugs, calling upon Satan, calling upon demonic forces, and which is why they're able to produce like this music which impacts people. So I think people need to be vigilant, especially things like magic. Now a lot of Harry Potter, for example, I've refused my kids to ever read Harry Potter or watch any of this kind of stuff. It seems like harmless, but actually it's very sinister. It's very sinister. It kind of glamorizes magic, and it's a gateway to being interacting with satanic forces.
And at the very least, we can say that it is at least normalizing those ideas which
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And unfortunately, there's one more thing I would like to mention. So before we enter discussion, also if you look into anime, which is becoming very popular nowadays, it is kind of really interesting that most or a major chunk of animes would have like the same storyline of this figure, for example, who is weak, and then somehow he wants to gain power, and something related to demons that most animes would have these demon figures, and these demon figures would make deals with them, and they would show that okay, they are making a deal with the demon, and you lose something but you gain powers, stuff for a line that almost all animes would have some major chunk of those animes, adult animes, would have these storylines, and this becomes very much normalized how they depict these. So it's kind of questionable why almost major chunk of these animes have the same kind of storyline of demonic forces, and then you make a deal with them, and stuff like that. So it's kind of questionable. Allah knows best.
Allah musta'an.
So I think that's my time with you. I think we will have another section with you.
Inshallah.
There is going to be a lot of many interesting things. I have a lot to talk about. Something like psychedelics, maybe we can deal with that in the next.
Inshallah. Inshallah.
Something like OCD, I want to talk about. Is there an overlap between these two realms? The mental and the spiritual. Then we have many other topics. Autism, we can talk about that. Near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences. And of course, I keep the rest for later so that people, anticipate what is going to come out. I'm just going to say that it is very, very interesting. And inshallah, please, stay tuned. Soon we're going to have another discussion on this fascinating topic. Jazakallah khairan for coming. I'm really honored to have you here and, to speak about so many of these, interesting topics, and those stories that you mentioned. I mean, those were chilling stories.
Yeah. Jazakallah khair wa yakum. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me for any errors I made. Anything that is correct is from him. And I want to thank you, Akhi Khalid, for brilliant discussion. We touched on a lot of things, so I think inshallah your audience will benefit from a lot of depth that we went. And it was a very organic discussion, alhamdulillah. Right. This is the way it works well. If you have like kind of question answer kind of thing, I personally don't like that. I prefer the organic discussion. And perhaps we can talk about, maybe we can do like a live podcast. Maybe we can get Gabriel and we can ask people to interact with us as well, ask questions, and that would be a good thing. Yeah, because this is an area that is lacking mental health and the metaphysical kind of interface, inshallah. So Jazakallah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, and inshallah remember me in your du'as, and for all the brothers and sisters, remember us in your du'as, especially in Ramadan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our fasting, inshallah.
Ameen. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.